Inshallah, in today's program, we're going to be discussing Muslim Ibne Aqeel, who, as we know, was regarded as the first martyr, from the group of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. As we know, where do we start off? We start off, we've all heard the story of Muslim Ibne Aqeel. Now, at the time, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he had received thousands of letters from the people of Kufa. And, the people of Kufa, this was at a time when, the Kufans had been informed of the death of Muawiyah, who they saw, great tyrant. And they saw how Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he had not given allegiance to Yazid. And they saw that even he, didn't like the way they were going. So what they did was they all gathered and they sent thousands upon thousands of letters to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, asking for them to come over, asking for him to come to Kufa and lead them, and try to revolt against the evil tyrants. So they sent thousands upon thousands of letters. There's some reports that say that they sent about 12,000 letters, and this wasn't in the span of a long time. It was in the span of a short amount of time, and all of a sudden 12,000 letters were sent. Now, after all of these letters has been sent, there were different things. They were letters to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, like I mentioned, expressing, joy over the death of Muawiyah, who they seen as, a tyrant, and, how Yazid really wasn't fit to rule, how, the type of things that he was doing, how he wasn't fit to be the Khalifa. So they were asking Imam Hussein alayhi salam to come over to Kufa to lead them. And, they swore their allegiance to him, that if he came, that they would 100% be with him and they would help him. And, they would follow his path. So, in response to this, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he had a letter in response to this, after seeing all the thousands of letters from the people of Kufa. And he responded to these letters by saying, "From Hussein ibn Ali to Muslims and the faithful. However, Hani and Syed said, the last messenger of the Kufans, the two last messenger of the Kufans have been Hani and Syed, which were the people who had sent the letters. So it says, Hani and Syed, the last messenger of Kufans, brought your letters to me. I knew about what you had said. We have no leader in Imam. Rush towards us that God leads us to the true path. I send my brother and cousin, Muslim Ibne Aqeel, whom I trust you. If he writes me the people of virtue in Kufa approving what you said, I will move towards you soon, God willing. I swear to my soul that Imam is nobody but one who rules according to the book of God, holds justice amidst the religion of God, and dedicates himself to divine pleasure." Now, this was the response of Imam Hussein alayhi salam to the thousands of letters they had received from the Kufans asking him to come over. So he said that he was going to send over his cousin, and of course a very, firm believer, very trustworthy person, very brave person, Muslim Ibne Aqeel. So Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he summoned Muslim Ibne Aqeel, and he had told them what the Kufans had said. He showed Muslim Ibne Aqeel all the letters they had sent, and he gave him a very important task, which was, he wanted Muslim Ibne Aqeel to go to Kufa, and he wanted him to accept the allegiance. He wanted to see if all the people were really sincere, if they really meant that they wanted to pledge allegiance to him, if they really meant what they had said in those thousands of letters. Now, brothers and sisters, let's stop for a second. Imagine the type of personality that Imam Hussein alayhi salam chose, Muslim Ibn Aqeel, the type of personality that he had to have to be awarded with such an important task. It was, this was a place, Kufa, and the bravery of Muslim Ibn Aqeel to be able to accept this 100% is that, look at the bravery of Muslim Ibn Aqeel, that this was an area that they didn't know, much about. They received those thousands of letters, but they didn't really know. You could call it was kind of like uncharted, territories. They didn't really know. They didn't know if the people were sincere, or, they didn't know what was going on. So the bravery of Muslim Ibn Aqeel, that he had 100% trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that no matter what happened, that his Imam had told him to go to Kufa. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills, everything will, go good. If not, it's by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Hussein alayhi salam said to Muslim Ibne Aqeel, he said, I send you to Kufa where God will do unto you what he admires, and I hope we are ranked as martyrs. So by asking the help of God, depart to Kufa where upon arrival you can dwell in the most reliable homes. Now, this was the message that Imam Hussein alayhi salam had sent Muslim Ibne Aqeel. And you can just tell by the way, the way that he talks to him, is that they knew that this was by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No matter what happened, whether everything went right and the people were true, they were honest, and they really did, they fought with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or if the opposite happened, something went wrong, they were dishonest, they didn't mean what they said, but they accepted the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are, this was one of the many lessons that we have to learn. And you see in the story of Karbala, the story of the people who sacrificed their lives for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, that we should always be willing to, we always have to yield to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no matter what happens. Whether something good happens, whether something bad happens, we should always accept it. And we should try to prepare ourselves for the day of judgment. We should try to prepare ourselves for when we leave this world. That's one of the most important things that we have to learn. That even if, we always remind ourselves that human beings are always made to forget. So we have to constantly remind ourselves why we're here. That everything we have means nothing. That from, I have this toy, or I have a car, whatever it is, it's nothing. In the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's worthless. The only thing that matters is if you follow the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you do the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to do. And this is how, we just read about Muslim Ibne Aqeel, that he was given a task by Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and without asking anything, without, I don't know, I have a family, but he went forward. And he did it because he knew that that was the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, here, Muslim Ibne Aqeel, he now has departed to Kufa, and he brought, the letter from Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he brought it to the Kufans. And when he arrived in Kufa, he arrived to a very warm welcome. He arrived to thousands of people who were, they were pledging their allegiance to him, and they were swearing their allegiance to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And it was an overall, it was a very warm environment, that he saw that all of these people are actually coming. They sent those thousands of letters, and they actually mean it. So at this point, this is when Muslim Ibne Aqeel, he sends a letter to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And he says the letter to him that yes, the Kufans, they did mean what they said. They were truthful. They were, honest. They actually, they pledged their allegiance. And he told Imam Hussein alayhi salam that yes, it's okay to come. Because Muslim Ibne Aqeel, he had went there to check if it was okay for Imam Hussein alayhi salam to come. So now Muslim Ibne Aqeel says to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he sent a letter, he said, yes, it's okay to come. Because look around, look at everything he had. That all the people, it said there were, I think, about 30,000 Kufans had pledged the allegiance to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And he had all of that support from so many people. It was at that time when he had the support of, like 30,000 people, that if Muslim Ibne Aqeel wanted, he could easily overthrow the government. He could easily, overthrow the governor of Kufa if he had wanted to do that. But he didn't do it. Why didn't he do it? He didn't do it because that's not what Imam Hussein alayhi salam told him to do. He didn't do it because the Muslims, they don't act, out of aggression. That it wasn't needed at the time, so he didn't do it. And now look at the two different sides. That Muslim Ibne Aqeel, he just went there in a way of peace. He had went there to gain the allegiance and to see how the people were, and if they really did need Imam Hussein alayhi salam to come. And when he gathered the allegiance of these 30,000 people, like we mentioned, there were some terms of the allegiance, like of course that to call people towards the Quran, and of course the messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Sunnah the Ahlul Bayt, and to stand up against the tyrants, to defend the oppressed and taking care of the people who don't have much, the poor, equal sharing amongst the Muslims, that whatever they have, that to share it amongst the Muslims, and of course helping the Ahlul Bayt, helping Imam Hussein alayhi salam and his family. And that was one of the main things. So where are we in this story? Now, here's where we are. We're at the point where, right now, let's see what they have. Let's see the two sides of the coin. One side of the coin, Muslim Ibne Aqeel. Now, Muslim Ibne Aqeel has just arrived in Kufa. And he was welcomed by thousands of people, so many, different Kufans. They pledged their allegiance. Most of the Kufans had pledged their allegiance to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. They said that they did need Imam Hussein alayhi salam. They were willing to fight for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And this was the point, like I mentioned. Now, this was at the time. So, like I mentioned, the Muslim Ibn Aqeel, he actually did have the power that if he wanted to overthrow the government at that point, he would be able to. Now, this is when the governor of Kufa, who was a man by the name of An-Nu'man bin Bashir, this was when he was informed by his advisors about the growing popularity of Muslim Ibn Aqeel. May Allah have mercy on him. He was informed that, there was a danger coming, that Muslim Ibn Aqeel, they could have an uprising. Because that's one of the things that these people were very scared of. They were very scared of a constant threat of a revolution. They were always afraid of someone's going to revolt, someone's going to do this, someone's going to do that, they're going to kill us. Why? Because they were constantly committing oppression. They were tyrants. So, of course, they were always, the Umayyads were always, looking behind their back, seeing, someone's going to, try to stab me. Because that's what they were doing. They were doing wrong. They were doing unjust. They were, torturing the people. So, that's why they felt that way. And Muslim Ibn Aqeel, what was he doing? He wasn't doing anything. He was merely preaching to the people. He was gathering allegiance for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And of course, we know the type of personality Imam Hussein alayhi salam was. He wasn't, they weren't going anywhere to try to raid the whole place and take over. They weren't doing that. Everything they did was out of peace. Everything they did was to try and spread the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when the governor looked at this, he couldn't really find anything. He said, he didn't really think that there was a threat. He said that Muslim Ibn Aqeel, the way that he had seen him so far, that he didn't think it was a possible threat. And he thought that, he was very, that his message, the Muslims' mission, it was purely religious, and it had really no threat to the government. He wasn't trying to overthrow the government. So this is when he gave a speech. He went up in front of, a lot, the Kufans, and he gave the speech, and he said that he wasn't going to harm anyone. He wasn't going to harm anyone who didn't try to fight against the government. But he said that he would harm those who fought against the government. So this was the thing that the man, we look at him compared to the other, Bashir compared to the other governors. Now, what did he think? He thought the regular thing, that he's not coming over here to take over. And that's what it was. He hadn't come there to take over. But this thing by the governor, that he didn't see a problem, his failure to take action and try and, kill Muslim Ibn Aqeel, this is what made all of his, the Umayyads of Kufa, made them very uneasy. So, because of this, they felt that he wasn't doing anything about it, and they felt that this was, Muslim Ibn Aqeel was a legitimate threat. So they sent a letter to Yazid, and they told Yazid about how, that this man isn't doing anything, he's basically worthless, and how Muslim Ibn Aqeel, he's starting an uprising, he's gathering the people, and, his Khalifa is in trouble. So, of course, by hearing this, Yazid sent a man who was Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, may the curse of Allah be upon him, and he sent him, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad was known as the cruel, governor of Basra. So he had been known for his cruel, being evil, the vile personality that he had, and how he tortured the people. So that's why Yazid sent him to go to the city of Kufa, so he could get everything under control. Now, when Ibn Ziyad came to Kufa, he dressed in very, modest clothes. He dressed in the manner of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He dressed the way Imam Hussein alayhi salam would dress. Wearing very modest clothes, very simple clothes. and he had covered his face with a veil. So when he had entered the city of Kufa, all this, he entered with, like I think 500 soldiers. And when he entered the city of Kufa, there were hundreds of people that came up to him, mistaking him for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. They thought that Imam Hussein alayhi salam had come. So they all came to him, they started, they kissed his hand, they said, oh, well, they welcomed Imam Hussein, they welcomed him because they thought it was Imam Hussein alayhi salam. But that's when they realized that it wasn't Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And it was actually Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, who was sent by Yazid with orders to kill Muslim ibn Aqeel. And that's when Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad said that he was going to kill anyone who, would dare, be with Muslim ibn Aqeel Islam, even associating with him. He would kill anyone. So this was at the point. Now, where are we so far? We came through the story of Muslim ibn Aqeel. Now, throughout everything we can see, I don't really see anything that, looking throughout this entire story, reading everything about Muslim ibn Aqeel and the Ahlul Bayt, you see that Muslim ibn Aqeel, he wasn't the aggressor in the situation. What did he do wrong? He didn't even try and take over the government. He didn't go try to take over the government. He wasn't, killing people. All he was doing was, preaching. All he was doing was gathering the allegiance for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, like Imam Hussein alayhi salam had told him to do. But look what happened anyway. That the cruel Umayyads, the cruel, Yazid and may the curse of Allah be upon him, and Ziyad, all these evil people, they still felt, scared, and they felt that he had a threat of taking them down. So that's when, at this point, Ibn Ziyad had become the new governor of Kufa. And he sent out an order that anyone even associating with Muslim ibn Aqeel would be executed right away. So that is when a man, Sharik bin al-Anwar, who was a sincere follower of the Ahlul Bayt, who had lived in, the city of Basra when Ibn Ziyad was there. And he had been aware that Imam Hussein alayhi salam was coming, that he had sent Muslim ibn Aqeel to the city of Kufa, and that he himself was planning on coming. And Ibn Ziyad, he had great respect for Sharik. He respected him a lot. So Sharik, he had actually become ill. He'd become very sick. So when Ibn Ziyad learned that he was sick, he sent word to Sharik, who was in Hani ibn al-Ward's house, who was also, one of the guides of Muslim ibn Aqeel, one of the loyal believers, and he said that he was going to come to visit them. So Sharik didn't like Ibn Ziyad. He didn't like him because of his cruelty. He didn't like him for all the injustice he had done. So they made a plan. He made a plan that he wanted to kill Ibn Ziyad. And what his plan was he was going to have Muslim ibn Aqeel to be in the back room. And when Ibn Ziyad was, with him, talking with him, he was going to give a signal to Muslim ibn Aqeel, and he was going to come out and he was going to kill him there. And this was the plan. Now, let's think about this for a second. If we look at this through our perspective, is there anything wrong with this? Of course, Muslim ibn Aqeel, you think, of course, he would do this, right? Why? Because you see this bad person. You see Ibn Ziyad, who is tortured and he killed thousands of Muslims. He was shaitan on this earth. He was so unjust. But what happened when Sharik gave the signal? When Sharik gave the signal, Muslim ibn Aqeel didn't come out. And Sharik gave the signal again, he didn't come out. He gave the signal again, he didn't come out. So at this point, Ibn Ziyad started to realize that something was going on here, and that that something suspicious was going on here. So he left the place right away. And when asked by Sharik, when Muslim ibn Aqeel was asked by Sharik about why he didn't come out, he said that because Muslims were never the ones to be the aggressors. In the sense that he was saying that, even Prophet Muhammad and his progeny, they had never been the aggressors. They had never been the one to start the fight. They had only been, out of self-defense. You see, even, Prophet Muhammad Imam Ali, all the people he had fought, He didn't fight them. They didn't fight to take over land. They didn't fight to take over other people. They just fought out of the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If somebody attacked them, it was always out of self-defense. Someone else would attack them, then they would attack. And you see, that's what happened here. Now I remember it was in, like the masjid. And you think about this like, I think this was a few years ago in the masjid. When we heard this story, one of the kids was like, oh, well, why didn't he do that? He would have stopped so many bad things that happened. He would have killed Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, who was, such a cruel person. That would obviously, save a lot of trouble, would have helped a lot of people. So why didn't he do it? Well, exactly that. It's because that wasn't the mentality of the Ahlul Bayt. That's not how they lived their lives. And you even see with Imam Hussein alayhi salam, that on the day of Karbala, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he gave them up until the last chance. He gave them up until the last second of his life to repent and ask for forgiveness. He gave them up to that second. That even throughout everything that they had done to him, they had cut off his water supply. They had, everything. They'd killed his family. He still gave them a chance to repent. He begged them to repent. Why? Because the prophets and imams, they weren't sent on this earth as, they weren't sent on this earth to misguide. They were sent on this earth to guide people. So everything they did, every word word that came out of their mouth was something to guide us. It was, part of the walking, talking Qurans, as they were called. They were the guide on this earth. So everything that we see, even when we look at this with the examples with ourselves, that no matter what it is, at the end of the day, injustice is injustice. And, justice is justice. So whatever we do, we should always try to keep that in mind. That whether you have a chance to, say, taking advantage over someone, you have a chance to do something. But it's not right. There involves, some cheating involves. Even down to a very small thing. I remember there was a vending machine. And the vending machine was, it was outside of like a gas station or something. And the vending machine, I put in, the soda was like, I think 75 cents or something. So I put in 75 cents. And then out of nowhere, it just gave me 2 sodas. So I was like, whoa, it's 2 sodas. Then and then I put it in again. And guess what? I got another 2. And we found out that it was, there's obviously a problem with it because that's not usually how it works. But because of this, we, I think we contacted the guys or something. We told the people that it was broken. Oh, yeah, we know. But even at that small level, even at that little small thing that you don't think twice about, you think, oh, it's nothing. Even that makes a difference. Even the tiniest thing can affect our entire lives. The way we act with a small situation or something that we consider small can affect our entire lives. And that's how we see with Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Now, we were talking about all the Muslims. We were talking about all of the people who had been with Muslim Ibne Aqeel. Now, how can they have such a rapid change? How can there be 30,000 people? Now think about this, 30,000 people who swore their allegiance to Muslim Ibne Aqeel. 30,000 people said that we will fight with you, that we will be loyal to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and we will follow, your path. We will follow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's path. 30,000. And then just like that, not too long after Ibn Ziyad comes, and he threatens them, he says this and that, those 30,000 turned into, 30, and then it turned into 0. There was nobody left. Now, Ibn Ziyad, one of the tactics that they used. Now, at this time, Muslim Ibn Aqeel, he had really nowhere to go. He stayed in the house of Hani. He was in their house. So Ibn Ziyad at this time, after, they had, what just happened, he had went to the house. He didn't know where Muslim Ibn Aqeel was. Now, these are some of the dirty tricks you see that the Umayyads used, especially some of the dirty tactics, some of the, the unlawful things that they did. Now, one of the tricks that he used was he contacted his slave, and they were trying to find the whereabouts of Muslim Ibn Aqeel. So he contacted his slave, and he gave him, 3,000 silver coins, and he told him to, look around the place, and he told him to see people who, may know Muslim Ibne Aqeel, or may know the lovers of the Ahlul Bayt, and he said to try and find Muslim Ibne Aqeel and say that he had to give this money. This money was from Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and he had to give it to Muslim Ibne Aqeel. So look at some of the dirty tricks that they used, some of the the scams that they used. So this actually worked. That the slave, he had the money, and he said, "Oh, I'm a friend of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. I need to give this money to Muslim Ibne Aqeel." So he was able to get into contact with one of the followers of Muslim Ibne Aqeel, and with this, he saw Muslim Ibne Aqeel, and he gave him the money. He gave the money to his treasurer. So now at this point, Ibn Ziyad had known where Muslim Ibn Aqeel was, unfortunately. So, of course, like I mentioned, he was at the house of Hani. So they captured Hani, and they brought him to Ibn Ziyad. And they questioned him about, if he was sheltering Muslim Ibn Aqeel. And of course, when they asked Hani, he didn't really give a direct answer. He of course wasn't going to, expose where he was. But at this point, that's when Ibn Ziyad, he called in the spy, and he asked Hani ibn Umar, he said, "You recognize that spy?" And that's when he knew that they had trapped him. And he said that he wasn't going to give up Muslim Ibn Aqeel. And Ibn Ziyad, he hit Hani on the face, and he hit him multiple times. He struck him on the face multiple times, and he broke his nose. And they locked Hani up in a room. And Hani was, he was the leader of a tribe. And when the tribesmen found out that Hani had not returned from, when Ibn Ziyad took him, they all surrounded the palace, and they threatened to, go in there and, kill Ibn Ziyad. They threatened that, a revolt. And, they were all very incredible warriors. They were all strong warriors. So Ibn Ziyad was actually scared of this. He was scared that this could cause a huge uprising. So what he did was he sent out a judge. He called for a judge, and he told the judge to tell the people. Now here's another one of the tricks. He told the judge to tell the people that Hani was fine. He said, "Oh, go look at him, and go tell them that he's fine. He's okay." And of course, no, he said to go tell them that he was alive. Now, what does alive mean? It's most bland to remember. Oh, he's alive, right? So, of course, they didn't give detail. They weren't like, oh, he was in the back room and they had, injured him and he had broken nose. But they just said that he was alive. So, now they used this, and, that caused some of the people to leave. And all of the people, like I said, the people gathered outside. Ibn Ziyad, he had sent out some of his spies. He had sent them amongst the crowd. And, he had sent them to say different things, like, they were able to he tried to convince some people, Ibn Ziyad told Yazid to send an army over. They're sending an army over, and they're going to kill anyone associated with Muslim Ibn Aqeel. And, you should go back, it doesn't matter. They tried to convince them, you can go back. Muslim Ibn Aqeel has followers, stay home with your family, And by doing this, they were able to actually convince them. They were able to trick all of them into going home. And they were able to trick them that, an army was coming and that there was no use in what they were doing. So they all went back, and pretty soon there was nobody left. And because of this, Muslim Ibn Aqeel was left by himself. He was left alone on the streets. He had nowhere else to go. He had no supporters left. And this is when he went and he found the house while he was, wandering around on the streets. He was able to, he found the house of an old woman named Dua, who was a lover of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. And, when she found out who he was, that she was Muslim Ibn Aqeel, who was sent by Imam Hussein alayhi salam, she invited him inside, and she gave him food, she gave him water, and she said that she helped to hide him from Ibn Ziyad's soldiers. But the Thua's son was actually a soldier in the army of Ibn Ziyad. So when he came home, he found out that, he could feel that his mother was hiding something. So he asked, well, what's going on? Who's visiting us? And she said, don't tell anyone, but Muslim Ibn Aqeel, Imam Hussein alayhi salam sent him. He's our guest right now. He's our guest. So the son swore. He said, I'm not going to tell. He's like, okay, I promise not to tell. And unfortunately, that wasn't the end of the story. As we know, like many of the things, like many of parts of the tragedy of Karbala, then after this, of course, the next day, because of his own greed and he wanted financial gain, the son went and he told Ibn Ziyad where Muslim Ibn Aqeel was. And Muslim Ibn Aqeel, Ibn Ziyad sent a soldier of hundreds of people, and they sent him over to kill Muslim Ibn Aqeel alayhi salam and to bring them to him. And Muslim Ibn Aqeel, he was surrounded in an alleyway, you could say, and there were hundreds of warriors, and the lane was so it was so narrow that they could only really put in 2 soldiers at a time. And Muslim Ibn Aqeel was only one person, and he was able to put up such a good fight. He was able to kill so many people. He was able to kill, they say he was able to kill like 40 people out of so many people coming towards him. And what the Kufans did was they used an old Umayyad trick, which was they put soldiers on the rooftops in the adjoining houses, and they told them to throw down burning torches soaked in oil. And what this did was this caused the entire lane to be filled with the smell of smoke and burning torches. Then the commandant asked his soldiers to dig a trench at the entrance of the street and cover it up with sticks and grass. This caused Muslim Ibn Aqeel, he was unable to bear the heat, he was unable to breathe, and this is when he came out of fighting. And when he came out, he fell into the trench, the concealed trench, and he was captured. This is when they took him to Ibn Ziyad, and Ibn Ziyad asked Muslim Ibn Aqeel if he had any last wishes. He said, do you have any last wishes? It was accustomed to ask him if they had any last things. So Muslim Ibn Aqeel said that he wanted to read 2 rakat namaz, so he read namaz, and he asked him anything else. Muslim Ibn Aqeel, he had 3 last wishes that he had asked. Muslim Ibn Aqeel, he first asked that, he said that he had some money in Medina. He asked if they could pay off his debt. Ibn Ziyad agreed to this. He then asked if he could have a proper burial. To this, Ibn Ziyad denied it. He said that he doesn't need to have a proper burial. And the third thing was Muslim Ibn Aqeel, he asked Ibn Ziyad to send a letter to Imam Hussein alayhi salam and warn Imam Hussein alayhi salam not to come to Kufa and how the people had betrayed them. Even at this moment, Muslim Ibn Aqeel, he was, so sad about how the people had betrayed Imam Hussein alayhi salam. The people who had racked up in the number of thousands, 30,000 people, and they had supported them, but at the sign of trouble, as soon as their lives were threatened, they turned away. And unfortunately, that's the story of Muslim Ibn Aqeel and Ibn Ziyad. They killed Muslim Ibn Aqeel and they threw his body from one of the highest pillars. They threw him from one of the highest buildings, and that was the tragic story of Muslim Ibn Aqeel, who was regarded as one of the first shaheed in the camp and the group of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and how he did what he was supposed to do. Muslim Ibn Aqeel, he had the order from Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and he had such a dangerous task that he was going to go to the people of Kufa, someplace that he didn't know. He didn't know what was going to happen, but he did it anyway. And we see that the example of some of the things, one of the main things that we can learn from this is not only, it's not just, we have to be constantly preparing ourselves for, when we leave this world. We see from the example of those people, those Kufans, the thousands of people that they were willing, that on the outside they were able to, they showed they were going to pay the allegiance, they supported Muslim Ibne Aqeel, but at the first sign of trouble, as soon as their lives were threatened, as soon as, they threatened their families, they threatened this and that, they were no longer supporting. As soon as they, fear. So we have to use this example and see that it's one thing to say that, if I, when we talk about Karbala, if I was, with Imam Hussein alayhi salam, I would have definitely helped him, no doubt. I would have been there. And we say, and you see with also the example of all the people who were the companions of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, who were with Imam Hussein alayhi salam, who followed Imam Hussein alayhi salam. But at the end of the day, when Imam Hussein alayhi salam needed help, and he called for them, and he asked them to join him, there were only 72 people. Out of the thousands that were with him, there were only 72 that remained. So inshallah, we're able to use the story of Muslim Ibne Aqeel. We are able to use the story of all the other Shuhada of Karbala, and we're able to use them to impact our own lives. We're able to use these examples to change our own lives and the way we think about things, and realize that our time in this life is short. So everything we do, from big to small, we should always try to do it in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Well, that's all the time we have left for today. Thank you for everyone who participated in our program. Now I'm going to do Allahumma kulli waliyaka for the safety and protection of our 12th Imam, and inshallah we are all helpers of the 12th Imam. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma kulli waliyaka lahujjat ibn al-Hassan, salawatuka alayhi wa ala abai fi hadhihi as-sa'a wa fi kulli sa'a وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا وذليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وجفر. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين رحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وجفر.